I'll buy it.
Oh, no, sit down.
Felicia. That's right.
That was good. Really, I can't believe it. I'm sorry. Okay. I'm waiting on you. Just a minute. Okay.
Unless there's too many of you. We may have to do some of you about and then that way we should be able to put your picture centered around that flag, under that flag. Yeah, then the rest of you should just go. Okay, you starting, Miss Felicia?
I'm waiting on Tiffany to start the, I call this workshop of the Bryan Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present, that this workshop has been duly called, and that notice of this workshop has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. We do not have any citizen comments for evening. Okay, so our first item on the agenda is going to be spotlight on the maintenance department, and I'm going to go ahead and turn that over to Dr. Whitbeck.
Thank you, thank you. As we see gathered behind us, today is a special day for us to take a moment and say thank you to critical workers in this district. And we cannot express enough our gratitude to all of you, all of the time, but especially with the last freeze that we had. And so Ms. Carabine, who works very closely with Mr. Peterson and all of the team, is going to elaborate a little bit on the difference that you made. And then, of course, we have some goodies for you before you leave. But from the bottom of our heart, and I know the board is going to want to chime in, we cannot thank you enough for the work that you do for our children and our district.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Whitbeck. And yes, every day in Bryan ISD is a celebration of our maintenance department for everything that you do, your dedication and your commitment. But we do want to shine a light on the heroic or the Herculean effort that occurred during the winter storm. It was because of these guys and their foresight with the leadership of Mike Cullen. Mike Cullen, raise your hand so everybody can see. Mike Cullen stepped up to the plate like nobody's business and led this team to do the work that needed to be done before the storm even hit. They were calling me days before, looking at the forecast, knowing they had to make some bold decisions about draining chillers and doing things like that. Because of that work, and because of the work during the storm, even with ice on the roads, as treacherous as it was, some of them were able to get out and get to our facilities and take care of things before it became a catastrophic event, and then the work following right after the storm ended. These guys, I would venture to say, saved us hundreds of thousands of dollars, probably in the millions, if they had not done what they did to prevent the catastrophic things that we're seeing that have happened in other school districts. Besides the financial side of it and all the money that they saved us, imagine what it would have been like for our students, our parents, and our staff had we had any catastrophic events. I know there are school districts that can't even put their kids back in their facilities yet. So thank you, thank you, thank you for all that you did throughout that. I know you were up at the crack of dawn because Mike Cullen was calling me. We were up one night until 1 o'clock in the morning with a boiler issue at Branch Elementary. So they were literally working from sun up to way past sundown every day of the week, Saturday and Sunday included, to do everything they could to save our buildings. And it wasn't because they had to, it wasn't because it was their job. They went above and beyond the call of duty to literally get out on treacherous icy covered roads to do the work that they did. So we thank you from the bottom of our heart, and we appreciate you more than ever.
I have a question.
Yes.
How many of you went to Bryan schools? See,
Ah.
it's so cool because those guys, they knew where they were going.
Yes.
I want to say one thing. It's not just me. And this is a link in the chain. This is a strong chain. So they've all deserved it. It's not me.
Yes, every man there. And with that, I want to put a name to the face. So please show your appreciation with me. Again, thank you to Mike Cullen, Mr. Ron Cooper, Chris Almanza, Antonio Gonzalez, John Carroll, Ivan Edgerson, Cliff Fields, Christian Garcia, Lou Hines, Christian Lynch, Gilbert Perez, Jose Rivera, Robert Rueda, Michael Seeley, Michael Shirley, Morgan Shirley, Sean Zeifel, Greg Bauer, Doug Claudenfelder, Tim Looper, Roberto Gandara, Jorge Garcia, Miguel Garcia, Jamie Harville, Michael Jones, and Michael Watson. Did I forget anyone? That's all on my list?
Just read my last name.
Oh. My apologies.
Mr. Cooper, not Looper.
That's Mike Collins' fault. I can't read his writing. But again, thank you. I know I saw some of you because I went out and about during that. Dr. Whitbeck and I actually both went to Houston Elementary. That's the only campus that we had to switch to virtual learning for a couple of days. And I'm telling you, when I got in there and talked to Impact Fire and some of those gentlemen that were working on it, when they told me that there were icicles hanging from the sprinkler heads and a sheet of ice on the kitchen floor, that all tells you how cold it was in those buildings. And it wasn't anything that we could have done differently. We never anticipated those rolling blackouts. And as you know, some of your homes were without power for hours on end. Because of that, the conditions were, just unprecedented as far as how cold it was. So we know how fortunate we were that you had the foresight that you did, and that everything you did before, during, and after that storm, again, saved us hundreds and thousands of dollars and prevented our students from having to, move away from face-to-face learning. So thank you again. And as a small token of our appreciation, we have boxed lunches for you and a little swag bag for you today. But please join me in congratulating our wonderful.
And we want to get a photo. Board members, and as our board members are coming forward, I want to make sure you know who they are, because they're the ones that volunteer their time to make all of these important decisions and votes in our district. So as we see Ms. Fran Dwayne right here, Dr. Deidre Davis, Felicia Benford, Ruthie Waller, and David Stasny. We also have Mark McCall, who is sick today, and Dr. Julie Harlan, that had a work conflict. And then, of course, I'm Dr. Whitbeck, and we all just thank you so much. So let's maybe get in between them. Is that all right, board members? And we'll get a photo. And Ms. Caravine, come on up and jump in here, too. Do we need to move this chair? Maybe move that one.
Okay, everybody looking here.
Smile with your mask.
I don't have my mask on. Oh, no, I'm going to get in trouble. My husband said, I can do that. Wait, can I get my mask?
There's always one in every crowd, right?
There's our rebel right there.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I guess,
Thank you. And the lunches are out there already? And there's Papa Rodriguez.
if you want to buy from the building right here, we've got, great room temperature, temperature, conference rooms. If you want, we need to know that time and how many times, whatever you want to do that. Whatever you do. Appreciate you. Thank you so much.
That was a nice way to start, wasn't
Okay, so we'll get back to the agenda. Next up on the agenda is the update on the teacher incentive allotment strategic planning committee. Wow,
Right. Thank you, Ms. Benford.
we need an acronym for that.
TIA.
Okay.
TIA, there we go.
TIA.
Yes, ma'am. So I wanted to come and give you an update on the progress of the Strategic Planning Committee for the TIA and let you kind of know where we are now and how that team has been progressing in the development of our application, which is due to TEA on April 15th. So again, bringing us back to the purpose and the why of how this fund was developed by the legislature during the House Bill 386 legislature. It was produced to reward, retain, and recruit highly effective teachers. Essentially, they wanted to recruit people to become teachers, and they wanted to reward and retain those highly effective teachers that showed high student growth and high performance in the classroom. Wanted to keep them in the classroom with the idea that perhaps the teacher would earn up to 6 figures serving students. So, what we've done since the last time I updated the board, which I believe was during the winter storm, and we've spent some time, I was in my car at that time, but we've been busy nonetheless. And in fact, during that week, we did some video updates and some surveys so that people could do it asynchronously so we didn't lose time, but we still had conversation and we still had input. We've also held a number of informational sessions for teachers. Those were well attended. Roughly 475 teachers attended those. One of the nice things about Zoom is the room is not full. And you can keep adding people who are interested. So we were really pleased to see the interest from the teachers of learning about where we were in the process so far and knowing who they could go to give their input on their campus. So we've got a great attendance for that. We have made some informational type videos of that session and put it out to teachers, so if they weren't able to attend, they still were able to view the recording of that meeting, so they got the information. The committee itself has met 2 times since the last board meeting, keeping on track with the progress of the application. The teacher focus group has also been engaged on a number of different topics and surveys. And again, they run parallel to that committee and inform that committee with additional input from the teacher level. We also have started a dedicated email account. So far, no emails have come in for TIA. I expect that'll happen around April when everything's set and those faculty presentations begin on here's what it means for you. You are eligible this way, and here's what that'll look like for you. I imagine then we'll have more questions. The district leadership team, which is comprised of principals and directors and central office staff, have also been giving feedback to inform the committee and had regular updates, much like the Board of Trustees. And then this part is my favorite, the Group B teachers. I'm going to talk a little bit about 2 groups of teachers today. Group A, meaning they begin data collection next year because they have a reliable and valid student growth measure. And then Group B teachers who need to design, develop a growth measure, pilot it next year so that they're ready for the application in the coming year. The Group B teacher subcommittees are being led by directors and coordinators at the central office level. For example, Mr. Corbett is leading the fine arts teachers through a very similar process to what TIA is doing, but they're actually developing the growth measures. If it's a student learning objective, if it's a portfolio, or if it's a pre-test, post-test.
Those are the ones that are approved by TEA. So we have about 8 to 10 of those subcommittees being led for all of the teachers who will be piloting a growth measure next year. So that work has begun. It is slated to continue through the rest of this semester and conclude in probably June, perhaps July for some, so that when we come back in August, we're ready to work with the entire teacher workforce for those groups and help them understand what that means in terms of piloting that growth measure. So I'll speak a little bit more to that as we progress with the presentation. But so in addition to the Strategic Planning Committee and the focus groups, we now have 8 to 10 other subcommittees of teachers working on developing those student growth measures specific to what they teach, okay? So that's the nutshell of it. So a lot of stakeholder engagement, a lot of voices at the table, and with that comes some great dialogue. So remember our big 3 questions. Who can earn a designation? How will we designate? And how and when will we compensate? So at our last board meeting, the Board of Trustees approved the purchase of the MAP program by NWEA, which will mean that teachers who teach or could use the assessment K-12 ELA, K-12 MAP, and 212 Science are eligible as a Group A teacher. So when we say could use the assessment, for example, if a teacher teaches personal financial literacy, technically the MAP assessment would work for them, even though that may not be coded as, it may be put as a CTE versus a MAP course, they're still eligible. So when working with our teacher groups, we're asking them, do you feel like this is a reliable and valid measure given the standards you teach and what it assesses? And so working with those teachers to identify the most appropriate growth measure for them. For some of those teachers, it may be that they use the MAP test in year 1 while simultaneously piloting a pre-test, post-test to see which one they feel gives the most accurate picture of student growth for the course that they teach. So one of the things that TEA focuses on here is that teachers have a strong voice in the selection of the student growth measure for the courses that are taught across the district. And so we're trying to hold true to that and make sure that they're engaged and involved as we go through the process. We also noted that Circle will be used at pre-K, and that will be our growth measure. So eligible teachers are ones that would utilize one of these assessments. Those are our Group A teachers, okay? The Group B teachers, that's what you're seeing here on the screen, must use another growth measure, and they must design and develop it, and then pilot it to see the data on it, okay? It can be a student learning objective, which manages or looks at and assesses some major standard or skill that's related to the course. And it would be the same over the course of the year for the students who are in that group. It could be a pre-test, post-test. This is likely going to be utilized in many of our social studies courses, especially those that have an EOC as an end-of-course assessment. It could be a portfolio. Typically, portfolios have not been done across the state. And so when we talk with TEA, there's a lot of subjectivity that can sometimes play into a portfolio. There's also a lot of oversight that would need to transpire for portfolios. So they have not seen a successful application and data test pass yet for portfolios. It's not that it's off the table, it's just if you can find another way, you might have more success with that student growth measure for the teachers. It still may be the best fit for some of our groups though. So CTE, fine arts, world languages, some of our special education self-contained classrooms, all of those groups are working through subcommittees right now to develop what that measure will be for them that's specific and meaningful to them in terms of the course that they teach and the students they instruct. They'll be piloting it next year, and then we'll be working on some data analysis using Dr. Morris's statistical background to set what those targets would be, that it's reliable and valid and implemented with success. And based on that, those that pass those internal data tests will be added into the application for the next year and begin data collection, okay? So that's a whole mouthful, and I'm probably talking, I've had a little Diet Coke and a little hot tea, so I'm probably talking a little fast, but those are our Group B teachers, okay? Group B teachers are piloting next year with the hopes they'll pass the internal data test for application in the subsequent year. But keep on hold, that doesn't mean they're not eligible in year 1. I'll come back to it, okay? So the next piece for the committee to determine was which aspects of our T-test observation process, which is approved by TEA, would be utilized in the scoring for the teacher for inclusion in TIA. You could include all 4 domains, or you must include at least 2 and 3, but you could include all 4. Texas Tech will look and pull the data for domains 2 and 3. And what happens is domain 2 and domain 3 have 8 dimensions, 8 items that are evaluated for a teacher. They want it down to that level, the dimension level. And they're going to look at the correlation between the t-test observation score for domains 2 and 3 and the student growth outcome for that growth measure. And if it's a positive correlation, well, it needs to be a positive correlation, and it has to have a correlation coefficient of at least 0.24 or higher, meaning that it's correlated, they match up. As a teacher's appraisal increases, student growth also increases. Those two things need to work in a harmonious relationship. So that is a piece of what this committee had to look at. What would we include in t-tests, in terms of t-tests? And as the committee discussed, they felt strongly that when we calibrate, meaning when one administrator walks into a room and evaluates domains 2 and 3, another administrator would come in and say the exact same lesson, and we evaluate it in a very similar, if not identical fashion. That's easier said than done, but it takes time and effort, and it takes practice. Aside from just passing the calibration test that's put out by the state, which all of our administrators do, it means a regular involvement of calibrating for t-tests. So the committee said, you know what? We are going to focus on domains 2 and 3. Those are the two that deal with instruction and learning environment the most strongly. The others deal with planning and then also other teacher leadership type items, and those are important. But if we're going to calibrate, let's get these 8 right. Let's get the 8 right that focus on the student outcomes, that focus on the student support, and let's get that set and straight and confident before moving out to any other areas. So, as the committee met, they also needed to discuss would there be any other components. And if you create a component, you must also create a scale by which you assign that component and an entire rubric to make sure it is reliable and valid. At this time, the committee did not want to add any additional items and components. They wanted to make sure that in the first year, we kept it clean, we kept it straightforward, and we kept it understandable in terms of the components and what they would be for our teachers. So, as you look at how will we designate, there are 2 additional bullets now on question 2, subset A, that domains 2 and 3 will be utilized from t-tests, and at this time, no other components would be added in. The committee went on then next to 2B. How will it all be weighted? So that's the next thing each district gets to design. How much will we weight t-tests as opposed to student growth? And the range between the feedback from the focus committee and the strategic planning committee kind of varied. There was 50-50 and 80-20. And so as the committee met and discussed, they kind of met in the middle, and they said, you know what? Both are important, and both certainly play into each other, right? The t-test appraisal should be correlated and improve student growth. So with that, they suggested that we move with a 40-60 split. 40% t-test, which if it's calibrated should not have subjectivity, but if there's ever a concern with it, it'd be 40% t-test, and 60% student growth, which is again a reliable and valid growth measure pertinent to the course. So 60-40 is what they came up with, okay? The next question on the table is the distribution of funds, and that's the next question, but that's technically a question for the Board of Trustees. And I have that for you later on the agenda today, but I wanted to give you some background on that conversation as a part of this. The TEA has set in the parameters that from the legislature that at least 10% can be reserved at the district level to support the TIA process, meaning the growth measure, professional development, whatever we decide that falls within those categories, okay? It could even be payout for other administrators, those sorts of things. And that 90% must go to the campus where the designated teacher works as a teacher, okay? So as the committee discussed this, they discussed the pros and cons of all of that. They all agreed that 10% needed to be reserved at the district level. It can help offset the cost of MAP. It can also help provide professional development, but we didn't want to tie any other payout to it. Suddenly your 10% can get spent pretty quickly if we keep adding more things to it. So we wanted to stay focused on, for the purpose of maintaining TIA and improving the support we provide to teachers to obtain a designation and to attain one, we wanted to keep that 10% set aside. The 90% can go a number of different ways. So you can share the 90% with the team in terms of it can be some percent to designated teacher and an additional percentage to everyone else on the campus who's a teacher or an instructional aide. or it can be just to the ones that were there, or you can put parameters on those that were there X number of days within the school year, who also had a growth measure of this and passed the PD or the T-test with this. You know, what you can add all kinds of parameters to it. It can get quite complex quite quickly. And so there was a great deal of discussion there, and I'll save the synopsis until we get to the next one. But I will say that there are good reasons for any way this is distributed. There's support for it. There's support for sharing. There's support for all of it to designated teacher. There's support for it. There's good justification all around the board. But I think it's important for us to understand what the options are for a teacher. So in year 1, 21-22, these are the pathways to a designation for our teachers. Group A teachers will be using Circle and MAP, and they're in data collection. Group B teachers will be piloting their growth measure. They are not in data collection. But all teachers have access to a designation if they want to undergo the National Board Certification process. That is a challenging process. It does come with upfront fees, which can be reimbursed by TEA and then by the district, but it is a rigorous process. And so that is an option for all teachers in year 1 of data collection, so to speak, to be eligible. Okay? In year 2, it is our hope that we get our subcommittees to get a reliable and valid growth measure where we can include them in the application. And then they too, Group A and Group B, would be eligible in data collection. So the purpose of our team is to try and make sure every teacher has a viable pathway to earning a designation. But as we know with TEA, not all teachers will earn a designation. Remember, it's the top 33 or top third of teachers in the state, and that's by statute, okay? And so you have the ability, you have the opportunity, where our job is to support you in getting to that moment and to see what we can do to shore up your skill set so that you can earn a designation by one of these approved pathways. So year 1, you're either a Group A teacher in data collection, or you could work on National Board Certification. In year 2, you have different options. You're in the district designated system, either for Group A or Group B, or you can also still work on a National Board Certification. Just a reminder, the National Board Certification process will get you the recognized level, but will not get you exemplary or master. To get to those 2 levels, you must go through the district designation system, okay? So, next steps for that committee and for our teamwork, right? Next steps are to continue working on those student growth measures for the Group B teachers and begin piloting them. And then also finalizing the T-test calibration calendar and the components that will be utilized to determine those scores, meaning how many walkthroughs, how many formal observations, and what that looks like. So that will be done with the campus administrators. We're working on that some tomorrow. We need to finalize the compensation plan for TIA, and I have that for your consideration today. And then we also need to communicate. Mr. LeBlanc would probably advise me to continue communicating about this particular project. But we need to go talk to teachers, and we need to talk to each campus so that they have clarity of where they are in that TIA process. When are they eligible, and how do they become eligible, so that they learn what this system is, so that they can be working towards a designation. In fact, it was interesting on the teacher informational sessions, one of the teachers who would be in data collection next year is eligible. She teaches a course that would utilize MAP, said, I'm on B-test right now, meaning she scored highly enough that she was able to waive her evaluations for T-test. She said, can I request to be evaluated this year? I said, you absolutely can. Because she wants to know what her scores currently are through the eyes of her administrator, so that she knows what she needs to work on and improve on to increase her score on T-test. So a lot of good motivation to improve your performance and have a true understanding of where you are in relation to what your administrator sees when they walk in. And again, just another example of how open our teachers are to grow, to help their kids, and to work on improvement, which was really nice to hear. So the faculty presentations will also help with that. And then Texas Tech will be sending a survey to all of our teachers on April 15th, asking them about our TIA process and our district designation system. The survey itself is quite lengthy. It's roughly 17 pages and has quite a bit of detail to it. So they use that though, not as an inspection tool, but rather a guiding tool for the district. So we know where we need to shore up our communication or our clarity for teachers so that we're serving them as they go through this process. So our TIA website is up and running. Mr. LeBlanc is adding content there regularly, and we will continue to do so, but it's a great source of information, as are our board meetings. I know several people have watched them and emailed me questions about TIA in particular, so it's nice to have those published as well. So that was a lot from me. What questions can I answer for you? And I'd be happy to go back to any slides you would like.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
On the board, national board certification.
Yes, ma'am.
You said that the fee for that can be reimbursed.
Upon successful completion, yes, ma'am.
Okay, does that come out of the teacher's pocket to begin with?
It does. The district will get reimbursement from TEA if the teacher obtains the full certification. If they just passed one component, so essentially there's a registration fee, and then there are component tests. Each component test is roughly $450. The total cost is just shy of $2,000 to go through the process. But the state will reimburse the district after the teacher posts the credential and the certification.
And then how would the teacher get reimbursed?
The district could then reimburse the teacher directly because they would post it to us as well.
You know, one of the things that I kind of got stuck on was the informational. It was back in the beginning because I wanted to know some concerns maybe or even positive comments that teachers have. But you also mentioned one towards the end here about one of the teachers who seemed extremely enthusiastic.
Yeah, the informational sessions were, it was interesting. A lot of them, it was about the growth measure and understanding what that meant for them. And then I spent a lot of time on this slide right here in those informational sessions, because I think the teachers need to understand if we could get them in data collection year one, we'd do it right now. We absolutely would. If we felt like we could do it with reliability, validity, and set the targets to the appropriate level of rigor comparable to STAR, we'd do it in a heartbeat. We want them to have these opportunities. But they needed to understand that some of this isn't in our hands. And so I think once they understood some of that, they're like, okay, well, what is my pathway? And just reinforcing national board certification is a pathway, but we know that that's expensive in terms of out-of-pocket up front. And it's also not going to get you past to recognize. And so we want to give you more options than that. So we're committed to developing those subcommittees to create those growth measures. So that was a lot of feedback from it. There was some discussion from teachers. Again, every answer is right. It's your perspective on the disbursement of funds, the 90-10, and what that looks like. It's interesting. There are certain groups of teachers who've been very collaborative and really want to share it with everybody on their campus, and other groups of teachers that are like, well, I would, but they don't help me get my growth measure. I do that myself.
So is there an option, I don't know if this is part of it, but when it comes to the designation process, kind of knowing what the teachers feel like individually, if you are awarded XYZ, would you want to use the funds collaboratively, or would you want to just disperse to you, or?
So we did that a survey-ish kind of. It was basically gathering feedback from the focus committee and the strategic planning committee. In total, roughly 70 teachers in that process, and asked them, okay, what would you want? And it's all over the map. Some, yes, please share only with, please share with everybody, please share only this much with, please don't share, I've earned this. And then we also have to think about the teachers who want to come here, who already have a designation. And that becomes a bit of a challenge too. So a teacher moves here from another district where they've already earned the designation. Remember, it stays with you for 5 years on your certificate, and they show up on your campus, and they are told, you're going to share your designated dollars and funds with people you've never met. And so that can also be a challenge in terms of a recruitment tool, and in terms of a teacher seeking out where to work.
So who actually makes that decision? Who does that?
The 90%?
We do.
This board this afternoon. Yes, ma'am. Yes, and that's why TEA and the TEA designed it that way, because it is teacher compensation. It is a school board decision, if I'm understanding the question. that it's a school board decision as to how to allocate that 90%. It does not fall to necessarily the strategic planning committee. They provide input, but the decision-making authority, because it is teacher compensation, rests with the board of trustees.
So have any administrators, principals, given you input about the way they build their teachers? How, because they know how cohesive their group is. So
We have administrators on the committee that we've also heard back from them as well. I think a number of the administrators, there are some that are very open to the idea of sharing it. I think they're open to anything. But they do have concerns when there are pathways to obtain a designation. Again, going back to in year one, essentially, you're either in group A or you're working on national board certification. And then by year two, you could do district designation or national board certification. Because there are pathways, I think some of the administrators looked at it as if you've earned the designation, you've earned the designation. I was speaking to others, and it is atypical for a teacher incentive-based pay program to allow for the division of those dollars amongst others. That's a different twist that had not been previously available. And working with TEA, they actually held a kind of a Zoom conference summit for several days over TIA and the application for cohort D districts like us. And the feedback from TEA was the vast majority of districts are giving the 90% directly to the designated teacher. There are, like I mentioned, there are so many complexities with how you would determine who else on the campus received a portion of that payout. And then at some point, when you divide enough, it becomes a very small number.
So the bigger your staff would affect
Yes.
everything. The smaller the staff.
Depending on how you assigned the payout. For example, if you were a pre-K teacher and you had an instructional aide and you really wanted your instructional aide to also receive the payout, would you put parameters on it? The instructional aide must have been employed from the beginning of the year until the end of the year. They must not have had an evaluation lower than X. What parameters would you put on it so that the people who are putting in the effort to get the growth for kids are receiving the compensation? And we're also recruiting people to be teachers. Remember, part of the process is to recruit and retain and reward. That's the foundation.
So did you say it's up to 30% statewide? Is that what I heard you say?
In terms of designated teachers, a third of the teachers in the state, they anticipate to be eligible for a designation.
So potentially we could have a lot of teachers in Bryan ISD qualify.
Yes, sir.
And is it correct that they would all get the same amount if they were designated?
Not necessarily. Same amount at the campus, yes, sir. Different campuses generate different allotment dollars.
All right. Well, I guess part of the thing that makes me feel a little better about 90% on one teacher, which I didn't mean to say that I felt bad about it.
Sure.
There is the team atmosphere. So is that it's not like it's one person. We hopefully are going to have multiple people. So it's
Absolutely.
not like, okay, it's one and nobody else gets anything. So I think that makes it look a little more fair, I guess you could say. And as I mentioned to you earlier, I think the intent of the program was certainly not to just reward a team, but to reward individual excellence. I think that's kind of what it was all about. Is that's the belief, even though they allowed it to be distributed differently. Well, I did have one other thing to just say. I'm sure most of I'll probably say the obvious to most people, but this is not a new idea to do merit pay. And in fact, we had a version of that was worked out that didn't last very long with our district, very recent, and it's been looked at over the years. And I just wanted to say that this is the reason it's been so difficult is because it's so difficult. It really is tough. You've got no, almost non-existent relationship to how scientists would evaluate something in terms of constants, and you've got all these constants, and so now we've got a variable here that we can evaluate. you've got variables on top of variables, on top of variables. And I'm not saying that to discourage you, I'm saying that pretty much to say how overwhelming this job is, and we certainly don't want to leave this opportunity behind just because it's hard. So I think more than anything, I just want to commend y'all on making the attempt, and good luck with not making anybody unhappy.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Yes, it is a challenge to find happiness for all in this moment. Yes.
Sooner or later, it looks like those teachers who tackle this early on, I mean, I can even think of some right now who are going to be our superstars. They tend to mentor anyway.
Yes.
So sooner than later, we probably will have teachers that have done this, qualified to start teaching the others that just may not, just may not understand exactly, because that's going to do nothing but help the kids. But is that
Yes.
part of the deal?
So when we were talking to other districts, in fact, one superintendent noted that, when they received the designations and the teachers were told what their payout amounts would be, they also did 90% to the designated teacher. I think they had kind of like the sweepstakes kind of big check moments with those teachers. It was a smaller district. But they said, some of the colleagues that also teach that subject and grade range were kind of like, well, I didn't get it. I was close, but TEA does set thresholds. For example, you must meet a certain marker on T-test and above to be included. You must have at least 55% growth for recognized, 60 for exemplary, and 70 for master, right? So those growth measures are pretty tight. But what we found is exactly what you just described. What we found was that they started seeking out the advice from the teacher who obtained the designation, saying, how did you do that particular lesson? Suddenly they were already collaborating, but maybe they weren't listening as intently as they were before. Now that they know the teacher gets growth with their students and obtained a designation, it became an opportunity for that teacher to lead and to present and to help mentor her colleagues, which was wonderful. Because it's not about getting growth higher than somebody else. It's about getting to those markers that TEA has set, 55, 60, and 70. So you're not in competition with my kids grew more than your kids. And so that, in that sense, the collaboration is still there about team ownership and team growth, which is great.
I think you probably covered this, and I guess this is just piloted for the Group B.
Yes, sir.
Is that student growth basically not, let's say you've got a physical education teacher, are we still talking about student growth?
Yes, sir. So in fact, Mrs. Kinley is leading her subcommittee on what that will look like or could look like for PE teachers. For example, the president's physical fitness exam, is it exam? Certification?
The President's Physical Fitness Award.
Award, the one I never qualified for in elementary school, yes.
In combination with the fitness grant, the two of them, if we take certain things, it's
So they're looking, could that be a good pre-test, post-test for their population of students? And then again, the challenge then is making it where you set the threshold of what you're to obtain to the same rigor of STAR in terms of assessing that. So how far can you take them in the time you have with them?
Ms. Kinley's a good one to deal with that group.
Yes, and I truly never got that award, ever, never. Janice and I joke about it. Any other questions I can answer for you?
Okay, thank
That
you
was
so
rapid, but
much.
thank you.
And a special thank you to Dr. Barra and all of the team of people that are digging into this detail. It's been monumental, and at a time where we just haven't had a lot of consistency in anything with the freeze, and we have reading academies that you've heard about, and we have this, and then we have mask changes. I mean, we just keep having a lot of things to deal with, but they have stayed steady in their meeting with our teachers and their processes to bring this before you today. So
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Barr. We'll see you in just a little bit.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, next up, we have business services. First on the agenda is consider approval of a contract for Crockett and Jones Elementary re-roof projects.
Okay, so this one is for the Crockett and Jones re-roof projects. This was part of the 2020 bond that was passed in November. And then after discussion with maintenance department, they told us that Crockett and Jones needed to be the first two roofs that will be replaced through the 2020 bond. Jones has a few areas with significant damage that does cause some pretty good leaks during heavy storms that are very temporarily patched, and it's kind of areas too where you get a little nervous walking up there in some of those areas. Bidding this project out, we had some delays with opening just because of the storm that came through in February. We had to keep pushing it, and we finally opened up this past Thursday, and 8 bids were submitted for this project, and from the 8, it was determined that Ally Roofing would be the best value contractor for the project. And the total amount for both schools is $3,029,277.
Paul, you mentioned the size, that it's really bigger than a normal elementary also.
Well, yes, Jones is a little bigger than the normal elementary because it was at one point a middle school, and there is quite a bit of HVAC and all the gray lines you see up there are the water lines and stuff that will have to be raised and everything. And then with Jones is going to be the tougher of the two, mainly because everything around, pretty much 90% of the soffit on the exterior of the building is asbestos, and that will have to be abated and replaced and everything, which will make it, at least it's outside and not indoor abatement, which makes it a little simpler and a little quicker and a little easier.
Jones was probably built in the 50s.
I'd have to look at the plaque inside, that's how I remember.
So do we know, Paul, how old those roofs are?
Well, this one is a gravel roof, so it's probably a good 20, 30 plus years old.
Mr. Stasny, do you remember? That's what I was thinking. We all look at Mr. Stasny.
I move approval of re-roof of Crockett and Jones Elementary to Ally Roofing Services in the amount of $3,029,277 as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Dwayne. We have a second by Dr. Davis. All in favor? All opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Second item on the agenda will be consider approval of SFA gym floor replacement.
So this is the Bronco gym floor. In that foyer, before you go into Bronco gym, in one of the corner rooms, there was an HVAC coil that busted from the freeze, snow, ice storm that we had a couple weeks ago. And with all that water that leaked out of that coil and from all that damage, it did spill into the basketball court, and half of the court has water damage. But after looking at it, luckily for us, it buckled up in a couple of places, so we were able to take the wood out and kind of look. That court is also on its last sanding, so it was going to be replaced anyways. And since 50% of it was damaged, the insurance company gave us the approval to replace the entire court. So with that, NAH Sports Flooring, they are the same company who did Gym 1 from the hailstorm. For that court, they are going to do the demo and replacement of the Bronco gym floor, and they're expecting it to take around 4 to 6 weeks for that from start to finish.
How far are they scheduling?
They are actually going to start SFA either Wednesday or Thursday of this week. And then Rudder, which was under 50 grand, that one they are going to start next week on it. So
Paul, can you mention the approximate age of the Bronco gym floor?
Oh, they're estimating that one to be close to 40 years old.
Okay, so it still has the Bronco, does it still have the Bronco in the middle?
It has a Bronco in the middle, but I don't know, that would be a recent one because it's been sanded and refinished.
Just saying.
That was my
It's an age.
generation. So David's generation was the floor before that.
Yeah, we're like 2 years apart.
I move approval of the SFA floor replacement to NAH Sports Flooring in the amount of $105,759 as presented.
I have a different number.
Number two.
What number?
Which class is on? Do you have a different number? Alicia, what number do you have?
105, 175?
That's what I
Yes,
have.
that's what I have.
105.
Did I?
Did you skip down one?
You may have.
Skip down one.
Okay. So do I say $105,175 as presented? $105,175 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Wall. We have a second by Ms. Dwayne. All in favor? All opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Third thing on the agenda is consider approval of purchase request over $50,000 for the replacement of the boiler at Minor.
Yes, and I think this might be the one, Ms. Waller, that you skipped down to, but this is another item that is due to the winter storm and the freeze at Milam. One of the boiler heat exchanger cracked due to the low temperatures. The age of that boiler is approximately 30 to 35 years old. So when looking at that and considering cost of repairs, replacement, it's deemed the best, most effective measure to go ahead and just replace that entire unit. And luckily we've had the insurance on board. They've been here, they were here the week after the storm, they were here last week, so going around with some of those nice gentlemen that you saw from maintenance and that, and looking at everything. And so that's the recommendation today, is that we follow through with that, and that'd be funded by the insurance.
So it's fully funded by the insurance?
Well, normally what they'll do is they do the depreciated value on it. They'll give us that up front, and then once we replace the equipment, then they'll fund the rest of the replacement stuff.
I move approval of the replacement of the boiler at Minor to R&K Plumbing in the amount of $79,298.19 as presented.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Dwayne, a second by Mr. Stasny. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you. Next on the agenda is consider approval of purchase over $50,000 for the replacement of an HVAC unit at Jones.
Yes, ma'am, and this is another item from the freeze that we've been able to get assessed. And part of the reason to get on these so fast is the lead time for these parts and things is out there quite a ways. So hopefully we could get these processed and get them done ahead of the game. But again, the HVAC unit was damaged with the freeze, and the cost of repairs, replacement, and such things on a unit like that, it was deemed that the insurance's agreement to go ahead and replace the entire unit.
Does this have anything to do with the power outage?
Yes, sir. Most of these things, the reason that we have some of this damage, or most of this damage, is due to the fact that the power was off for at least parts of the time, and therefore we lost heat, and then allowed the building to freeze in those cases. So there's not really anything, going into the storm. I mean, the plan was solid, we believe, but we couldn't really anticipate that we were going to have rolling blackouts, or the power was just going to go off and not come back on in some cases. Houston, for example, was off for quite some time to be able to get down to the temperatures that they did.
The reason I was asking, I was wondering, even though again this was a very unusual event, that would it have anything to do with, I guess that term winterizing is used a lot these days. We could, should we try to spend a little more to winterize, but it probably would have been okay as long as we didn't lose power. Then that might be the kind of the 1-2 punch that would not be expected to the point that you would pay a lot, money for, again, winterizing. So I just didn't know if any thought was given to that or whether you had a comment on that, but I'm certainly not looking to maybe spend a lot more money for something that had to be a combination of both weather and rolling blackout, which if the legislature does their job, will hopefully minimize that in the future, the possibility of rolling blackout.
Yes, sir.
Or at least they would be better than they were, because we had like a 5-hour at our house, and if you were having an hour on hour off kind of thing, you might have survived, I guess. But did you have long periods of time where the power was off?
Yeah, at certain facilities, and a good example of that is, I believe we've talked about Houston Elementary and Branch are the same, is that correct? They're
Yes,
virtually
same
the same layout, and the power was off at Houston for an extended period of time. At Branch, it was not. And so we have virtually, we had some damage at almost all campuses because of that, but not anywhere near the extent of damage at Branch that there was at Houston. And the main difference was just the length of time that the power was off for them. Yes, sir.
Another variable with Milam and Jones is the age of the units and their rooftop units. So they were more exposed up there, and again, with the power shutdown. So it did vary depending on the location.
I move approval of the replacement of the HVAC unit at Jones to R&K Plumbing in the amount of $146,724.55 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Waller, second by Mr. Stasny. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask you a question before you go? So, I know we will apply for any, is the state, through emergency, whatever we've got declared, is there any money for us for schools?
Yes, through TDM. Yeah, we've already been on a conference call that they've done to try to coordinate this as we go. Of course, they would only, you would be eligible for reimbursement for funds that were not reimbursed by insurance or some other possibility of federal monies. But yeah, that already is in the works, and we're on that. And I think TEA has a form that's out. I think it's due back April 8th, just an estimate of damages that all districts are going to fill out so that they have some idea of the damage, and that'll play into it as well, I'm sure. So yes, ma'am, that's in the works.
So to follow up on that, and just basically terrorize you, in the classrooms that received damages, did we have teachers that lost things? Like, I know the teachers do their bulletin boards, they have feedback from the board, things of that nature. Did we lose teacher materials in any of this damage? And if so, do we have a mechanism in place to help them replace them?
I can speak to that. No, nothing of any significance. The one campus that we had the most concern was Houston Elementary. It honestly would have been catastrophic, but we got over there when the pipes were still frozen, so nothing had leaked out, just minor drips. But since we didn't know, the maintenance team showed up and they literally pushed everything out of the vicinity of where the pipes would have leaked. So we caused a lot of disarray, but we went back and fixed it as best we could. But none of their stuff was damaged. We put down buckets and drip pans and you name it. We did everything we could to prevent what you're describing happening. So yes, we were able to save everything that we could. We even had Julie's technology team run out and put down tarps and move technology, cover the server room. We were doing everything we could before those pipes started to melt and any water came through. So lots of very responsive actions occurred.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're at teaching and learning.
Oh, here comes Barbara.
And Barbara.
In my quest to make everyone a TIA expert, I come before you this afternoon. Misery loves company, and I like you very much. Thank you, Ms. Binford. So this afternoon, I'm asking for the board's consideration of our spending plan for the teacher incentive allotment. Specifically, what's proposed today, and again, this is not always an easy process when we know that there's good reasons to go different directions on all sides of this. And as I was talking with the committee, I said, we are all going to have the right answer. We're just not all going to have the same answer. And so we have to look at what is the purpose of the TIA and what is it for Bryan ISD. And as we've discussed it, looking at the intended use of those dollars to reward the most effective teachers, to retain the most effective teachers in the classroom. I think that's important. Keep them in the classroom working with students, and to recruit a new workforce and other teachers of excellence to Bryan ISD. We feel it is in the best interests of the district and the teachers we serve to have the 10% at the district level and the 90% directly to the designated teacher. On top of that, we propose that that 90% be given directly to the designated teacher minus the TRS and other benefit costs. That way that funding becomes part of their TRS package. So it helps in terms of their retirement. Districts can elect to not include it in the TRS, but we believe it's in the best interest of the teachers to include it in the TRS. Along with that, there are other decisions we must make, and by we, I mean you. We need to, sorry, it's Comedy Monday apparently. So we need to decide, well, what happens if we have a teacher retire at the end of the year? Do the designated dollars go with that teacher, or are they dispersed in another way? Well, we wouldn't want our retiring teachers to think they needed to go somewhere else in their last year of service. And so we propose that it go to the retiring teacher or any teacher who's leaving, because there are good reasons why people have to relocate sometimes, and we don't want them not to stick with us because we have that parameter in place. So we believe the funding should go with the teacher to the designated teacher if they leave after what TEA calls the winter roster process, which is a European submission in February saying that I'm a teacher here on this campus. So at any rate, a lot of debate, a lot of input, and a lot of good justification from our teachers went into this. The message I would say to the teachers who are wondering about the whole process and about those designated dollars being shared is we're committed to creating a pathway, and we're committed to growing them to earn a designation. So we want to make sure they have the opportunity, and we want to make sure we provide the support where they can grow to be one of those designated teachers. And we want them to stay in Bryan ISD when they get there, right? We want to recruit them, we want to keep them, and we want them working with our kids. So certainly this is no small moment, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or any further discussion from the first presentation as well.
Well, I read something that there, under some circumstances, if the teacher did something, then they would not be able to get the award.
Right, they would actually, so if a teacher were with us in September, October, November, December, January, and they relocate in January, and two things, if they relocated to another district, well, they would get picked up on the February winter roster in that new district. But if they didn't go anywhere, they're not on anybody's roster, TEA doesn't disperse any dollars. So that winter roster is the trigger for TEA to send the funding allocated for the designations. Very good question, Mr. Stessing.
And I think it's very important to distinguish that that's a TEA rule, because we sat and talked through teachers having babies, teachers who have to go on FMLA. We talked through all these different scenarios before bringing forth, the recommendation. But the fact that they chose that winter roster concept is interesting in itself. But basically, we want to reward the people who have done the work to get the child through the year or through most of the year.
understanding that life does happen at times, it's out of our control.
Well, I move approval of the teacher incentive allotment spending plan for the 2021-2022 school year as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Stasny, second by Dr. Davis. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have Human Resources. We'll consider approval of the superintendent's contract recommendations for administrators for the year 2021-2022 school year.
All righty, good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to come up and speak to you. This is the first of 3 times I will come up and talk to you about contracts during this season. So today, on behalf of Dr. Whitbeck, I am presenting to you a recommendation for contract renewals for our campus principals and anybody who has a title of director or higher. So these are Dr. Whitbeck's executive cabinet leaders, all of her administrator leaders in the district, and our high school principals.
I move approval of the teacher, that's the wrong thing. I got too many documents. I move approval of the superintendent's recommendation to renew and issue non-chapter 21 contracts and chapter 21 probationary and term contracts for the 2021-2022 school year for administrators as presented.
I did hear you. I heard you now. Thank you. We have a motion by Ms. Wayne, a second by Ms. Waller. All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
The board will now convene in closed session to discuss the following items as allowed by the Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. 551.072, deliberation of real property, and Section 551.074, personnel matters. It is now 1:09. I'm gonna take that with me. I'm gonna take that with me. And I'm so glad you're back with me. Go back to the open session, to the closed session.
Yeah, we're back in regular session, we're adjourned.
The board reconvenes in open session at 1:51 p.m. No action was taken in closed session. We are now adjourned.